I think that there are many times we ask ourselves, where is God when these terrible things happen? And, I didn't do a message about 9/11 last week because, I'd been sick for a couple of weeks and I wanted to talk more about what had occurred with George and Pete and Steve. They're always backing me up, and I wanted to talk more to that last week. But in the middle of this week, we had 9/11, which now I want to talk about 9/11, September 9/11, and what that does to us and how we look at things. And in Romans chapter 5, we find that tribulations bring forth perseverance. Perseverance brings about character. And from character, we get hope. So tribulation comes in many forms, and 9/11 is one of those forms. Hurricane Katrina was one of those forms. So today I want to look at one of the greatest tribulations of my generation. And so last Wednesday marked the 23rd anniversary of the attack against the United States, which we now call 9/11. That day is a day that is ingrained into each of us, old enough to remember. Looking back, it's hard to believe 23 years have passed. And I'm sure those who experienced Pearl Harbor, it's hard to think back and realize all that time has passed. But that's one of those moments for that generation that remembers. And we all remember it, but we don't have the personal experience of being there or having been here in the United States when that occurred. So it's hard to believe that 23 years have passed for 9/11. I recall hearing and then watching the first tower being struck by a plane. And at first it seemed it was a horrible accident. I had just read an account of an airplane that had hit the Empire State Building. And that was an accident. On that day, the death toll from the 4 commercial aircraft, the Pentagon, and the World Trade Towers totaled 2,996, with another 6,000 injured. But I would say that that's not the whole story. Nearly 10,000 first responders and volunteers have since been diagnosed with cancers caused by the toxic fumes and dust. The total dead include the hijackers, the plane passengers, pilots, and crew, 2,606 people in the World Trade Center and nearby areas, and 125 people at the Pentagon. The 9/11 attacks killed 2,751 victims initially. In 2007, the total death toll was increased to account for those who succumbed to illnesses caused by exposure to the dust, debris, and toxins from the terror attacks. And tragically, that number will continue to rise, and it continues to rise right now. As of 2019, the new World Trade Center death tolls totaled 2,753, and the overall deaths from all afflicted areas is 2,996. The number of New York Fire Department members to die in the years since 9/11 now is at 370 and is growing. It took 23 years for those who would die from the 9/11 related diseases to surpass those New York Fire Department members who died on that fateful day. We talk about never forgetting this horrific event, and the deaths of people still dying from these 9/11 illnesses take it even more important that we must always remember. Many of the new generations never lived through this tribulation and wonder what the big deal is. But that day forever changed each and every one of us. I remember air travel changed forever. I knew none of those people in the towers or on those planes. And most of us may have never been to New York City. But our hearts are and were broken for those affected by that day. If we are honest with ourselves, I bet we all had questions following that day. Why would a religion that was supposedly built upon peace teach and demonstrate that much hate and violence towards others? Do you recall all the celebrating and the parades shown from the Arab world? They thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. More importantly to me and my faith, where was God during this? Why does God even allow bad things like this to happen? Many of us were confused, hurt. Maybe we were even scared. This morning, the first thing we learn is that God is big enough to handle our questions. He has broad shoulders. God is not petty. He did not give up on us, even when we may have been close to giving up on him. So the second thing we learn is that we weren't the first to question God. In fact, the Bible offers several examples of this very thing. In Psalm 10, verse 1, "Why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why do you hide in times of trouble?" Jesus himself asked this same question in Matthew 27, in verse 46. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, these words are quoted from the first verse of the 22nd Psalm. Psalm 22, verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from me and from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear, and in the night season, and am not silent. But you are holy, enthroned in the praises of Israel. But you, O Lord, do not be far from me. O my strength, hasten to help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dog. Save me from the lion's mouth and from the horns of the wild oxen. You have answered me. The destruction of the Twin Towers was devastating. And there is a biblical example just as devastating to those who were also involved. We have long since forgotten. We can read about it, and it doesn't have the impact. But to them, it was just as impactful as 9/11 is to us. The ending of Jeremiah and the beginning of Lamentations deal with that same time period the Israelites were going through. It describes the destruction of Jerusalem and the first Jewish temple by fire from the Babylonians, or modern-day Iraq. In Jeremiah 52, verse 12, it says, "Now in the 5th month, on the 10th day of the month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the captain of the guard who served the king of Babylon came to Jerusalem. He burned the house of the Lord and the king's house, all the houses of Jerusalem, that is, all the houses of the great, he burned with fire. And all the army of the Chaldeans who were with the captain of the guard broke down all the walls of Jerusalem all around." So, picture someone viewing the collapse of the city's iconic temple complex through thick black smoke jumping above the flames from a distance, just as we did as we watched along on television. The shock and sadness we felt on 9/11 is going to be very much like the Israelites when they saw Jerusalem being destroyed. And in Lamentations 1, verse 1, "How lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow is she, who was great among the nations. The princess among the provinces has become a slave." Down in verse 11, "All her people sigh. They seek bread. They have given their valuables for food to restore life. See, O Lord, and consider, for I am scorned. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Behold and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which has been brought on me, which the Lord has inflicted in the day of his fierce anger. From above he has sent fire into my bones, and it overpowered them. He has spread a net for my feet, and turned me back. He has made me desolate and faint all the day." 9/11, it was new for us, but I tell you, it was not new for God. God pulled Jerusalem out of the ashes, and he has done so for New York City. As bad as we see what is happening today, God knows our tomorrow. These following verses assure us of this. Lamentations 3, verse 21. This I recall to my mind. Therefore I have hope. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should hope and wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. You know, most of us are familiar with the story of Job. The stories of Job that I typically hear are of a man that was tested and tormented, but of a man who never questioned or complained to God. However, I'm a complainer. I could not relate to Job. Anyone who passes me while driving is a crazy person with a death wish. Anyone going too slow in front of me is a menace to society. Parking lot stripes are put there for a reason. There should be equal distance from your car's tires to the stripes. Toilet paper should unroll over the top, not backwards from the bottom. Turns out, Job was more like us than I imagined. He too had questions. He too was angry. He even wished he had never been born. In Job 10, it tells us in verse 1, my soul loathes my life. I will give free course to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Show me why you contend with me. And down in verse 8, your hands have made me and fashioned me, an intricate unity, yet you would destroy me. Verse 18, why then have you brought me out of the womb? Oh, that I had perished and no eye had seen me. I would have been as though I had not been. I have been carried from the womb to the grave. Are not my days few? Cease. Leave me alone that I may take a little comfort. Maybe somewhat like It's a Wonderful Life. And we see that, George wanted to die, but he had a purpose. He had affected so many people that he didn't even recognize. In John chapter 11, we find the story of Lazarus. Each of the two sisters, Mary and Martha, came to Jesus separately and asking that familiar question, where were you? And in verse 20 it says, then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. When those planes collided with the towers, and there was that immediate aftermath, I am positive millions of people were asking the same thing. God, where were you? Lord, if you had been here, this would not have happened. But I tell you, God was there. He too was devastated, more so than we can ever comprehend. On that day, people died needlessly. In John 11, verse 35, we find Jesus wept. 2 short words to a verse. Mankind was given free will. Not everyone chooses to accept Jesus as their Savior. Some people openly embrace sin and its evil influence. And bad things can and do happen to good people. Tribulations spring forth hope. And Jesus is our only hope. There's a poem for 9/11. Don't know who wrote it. But it says, you say you will never forget where you were when you heard the news on September 11, 2001. Neither will I. And this is God speaking. I was on the 110th floor in a smoke-filled room with a man who called his wife to say goodbye. I held his finger steady as he dialed. I gave him the peace to say, honey, I'm not going to make it, but it's okay. I'm ready to go. I was with his wife when he called, as she fed breakfast to their children. I held her up as she tried to understand his words, and as she realized he wasn't coming home that night. I was in the stairwell of the 23rd floor when a woman cried out to me for help. I have been knocking on the door of your heart for 50 years, I said. Of course I will show you the way home. Only believe in me now. I was at the base of the building with a priest ministering to the injured and devastated souls. I took him home to tend to his flock in heaven. He heard my voice and answered. I was on all 4 of those planes in every seat with every prayer. I was with the crew as they were overtaken. I was in the very hearts of the believers there, comforting and assuring them that their faith has saved them. I was standing next to you when you heard the terrible news. Did you sense me? I want you to know that I saw every face. I knew every name, though not all know me. Some met me for the first time on the 86th floor. Some sought me with their last breath. Some couldn't hear me calling to them through the smoke and the flames. Come to me, this way. Take my hand. Some chose for the final time to ignore me. But I was there. I did not place you in the tower that day. You may not know why, but I do. However, if you were there in that explosive moment in time, would you have reached for me? September 11, 2001 was not the end of the journey for you, but someday your journey will end, and I will be there for you as well. You know, in Isaiah 55, verse 6, it says, Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Then at any moment you are ready to go. I will be in the stairwell of your final moments.